With every new generation, there are winners and losers from the Pokemon that existed before. Decided, of course, by those cruelest of gods, Game Freak. With all the additions, subtractions, and changes they make, certain Pokemon become buffed. They are the winners. Sadly, in a competitive game, not everyone can win. Those that receive the best buffs win, yes. But Game Freak's famous cruelty is as boundless as Hoopa. It's not enough for the winners to win and the others to lose just by virtue of not being as good, effectively losing by omission. No, Game Freak takes an active role in creating losers. For example, in Generation 8, Aegislash had its attack and special attack slashed by 10, dropping it from one of the game's most certain Ubers all the way down to UU for a brief period. The process doesn't have to be so direct either. The removal of Pursuit was an enormous blow to Tyranitar. With the recent release of Scarlet and Violet, Game Freak have once again bestowed, removed, and changed many a facet of Pokemon, which has created new winners and losers. Today, we're going to examine the most striking winners and losers of Generation 9, those Pokemon that existed in Generation 8 and changed for the better or worse in Gen 9. But first, make your exercises at home and easy thanks to the sponsor of this video, Leaps and Rebounds Trampolines. Leaps and Rebounds sells high quality exercise trampolines that have quiet bungees with a firm bounce. Every trampoline comes with a list of free workouts if you don't already have some, and they are absurdly easy to transport thanks to their easy screw-off legs. In fact, Leaps and Rebounds are so confident that you'll like it that they even have a no-risk 30-day return policy. So get your Leaps and Rebounds trampoline by using my link in the description if you want a sick trampoline and also support the channel. Superpower is a great move. 120 base power, perfect accuracy, and superb fighting type coverage. However, for one thing, it isn't spammable on account of the fact that it drops the user's attack stat with each use, and as a result, superpower users are not going to hit their target with the same level of strength twice in a row, and are thus far easier to play around than the other fighting type move, Close Combat, which is just as strong, but far superior for the fact that it doesn't drop the attack stat upon being used. If the famed close combat spammers Infernape, Lucario, and Terrakion had been forced to run superpower instead, they would be far less dangerous, as a big part of what made them so threatening was their ability to attack repeatedly, a strategy superpower was counterproductive towards. Now, Breloom and Scizor were phenomenal despite their reliance on superpower for fighting coverage. Breloom could run Focus Punch, but that was not nearly as instantly threatening, especially once it had activated Sleep Claws with Spore. Other options like Sky Uppercut and Brick Break didn't drop attack, but were so much weaker initially that they became far easier to play around. Thus, most of the time, superpower it was. And it was still an excellent move, of course, but as great as Breloom and Scizor were with it, the fact that this was their best option could hold them back, most notably when trying to break through Skarmory. Imagine how much better they would have been in Generation 4 and after if they had been able to repeatedly bludgeon Skarmory with the same level of strength, or if they couldn't be played around by an opponent baiting their huge fighting move and switching to a resist in order to weaken them, or if they could actually spam said fighting move without restraint or consideration for subsequent turns with weakened attack stats. Well, in Generation 9, you don't have to imagine, because both Breloom and Scizor have finally gained close combat. Now they can slice through the new age steel fighting type Corviknight with ease. No more can a metal bird switch in, take over half its health from the first hit, and still be fine since the second hit is weaker. Now you can't pivot a fighting resistance and as a result, be better able to take subsequent bullet seeds or seed bombs from Breloom, or bullet punches and bug bites from Scizor. Breloom gains a new dimension of threat with this change, as now it can spam its safe, powerful fighting stat with reckless abandon, putting serious dents into even resist, especially if it dons a Choice Band. Choice Band close combat is one of the scariest moves in the game, capable of smashing through even resist. Choice Band's superpower after the initial hit is easily exploitable even without resist. Meanwhile, Scizor becomes far more threatening as well for having such a spammable move to rip through the steels that wall its stabs. Both Choice Band and Swords Dance sets will be scarier than ever. Close combat being added to the already terrifying physical attackers is pretty much a guaranteed win, and here it's enough to put Scizor and Breloom at number 3 on our list. Slowking was immortal in Generation 8. Between heavy-duty boots, regenerator, and slack off, it stayed healthy effortlessly. Between Slowking's excellent hit-taking ability and the negative priority of its switch move teleport, it ensured its teammates would be hitting the field completely unscathed. This was absolutely enormous, since it not only gave its threatening teammates free switches, but it did so again and again and again, seemingly to the point of endlessness. Slowking's ability to stick around forever and repeatedly provide its teammates with completely safe entry was nearly unstoppable, and it was a massively defining facet of Gen 8 OU. To the chagrin of many, frustrated with how risklessly Slowking could bring such immense benefit to its team. Plus, with a solid special attack stat and stab, scald, and future sight, Slowking was no slouch in dealing damage itself. In Generation 9, this immortal, all-healing, all-pivoting Slowking is no more. Like other recovery moves, Slack Off has had its PP halved, reduced from 16 to 8. This throws quite a wrench in its ability to stick around for what seems like forever. Of course, Regenerator ensures Slowking is generally not left wanting for longevity, but the lack of Slack Off means Slowking's not going to be able to be nearly as effective in going the distance. Not only that, Teleport has been replaced by Chilly Reception. Yes, Chilly Reception also has the unique effective trait of setting Snow as it pivots its user out, Snow being the replacement for Hail for those who aren't familiar. However, Chilly Reception also packs 16 PP compared to Teleport's massive 32. Thus, not only can Slowking not stick around forever anymore, it also can't endlessly feed its teammates with free switch-in. This results in a much more balanced approach to Slowking's strategy. Yes, it can stay healthy and bring its teammates in safely, but it can't do it nearly as freely as it did before. If it spams Chilly Reception, it's going to notice its PP running out far more quickly, and it's going to be wary of using Slack Off entirely. Furthermore, Slowking is no longer able to threaten the opposition with Scald Burns, which makes it easier for many Pokemon to take it on one-on-one. Yeah, its replacement move in Chilling Water lowers attack, but that's not nearly the same as the permanent chip of Burn. Its Future Sight can still set up excellent combos with its teammates in conjunction with Chilly Reception, but it won't be able to do so as endlessly. So Slowking, going from one of the easiest to use Pokemon to one that had to be more measured in its approach, ranks it as the third biggest loser of the 9th generation. A lot of Pokemon gained spikes in Generation 9, and Garchomp is the best among them. Chomp has always been a superb Pokemon, whether it's ripping it up with its nearly perfect offensive toolbox or acting as one of the best utility Pokemon in the game with Stealth Rock, Rough Skin, and Rocky Helmet alongside solid physical bulk. With spikes, it can support its team even more with the many switch-ins its typing, bulk, and speed afford it, and its game develops even more depth as a result. The immediate go-to set has been the long-standard Rocky Helmet variant with spikes, Earthquake, and Dragon Tail, but where previously would be Fire Blast or Toxic or Rock Slide or some other decent move that was rarely truly impactful is now one of the very best in the game. Spikes. This one's simple, straightforward, and easy. Depending on how Chomp wants to play it, it can either use its fantastic speed to reliably get up rocks and spikes early on, or it can use its defensive prowess to switch in and get the hazards up while checking opposing threats over the course of the game. Of course, in past generations, there was no reason that Stealth Rock Chomp couldn't also be a major threat in its own right. It used the turns it got from scaring out opposing Pokemon to set the rocks up, then was free to be threatening with its tremendous stab combination and Swords Dance or Fire Blast. As such, there is no reason the exact same cannot apply to Spike's Garchomp. It is sometimes more advisably to have rocks and spikes on separate Pokemon, as getting multiple layers of hazards is easier when one poke doesn't have to do it all, and this would leave Chomp more capable of laying multiple spikes. Plus, there are more rockers than spikers in OU, so this is something unique Chomp can bring to the table. Furthermore, when running an offensive spike set, Chomp isn't just supporting the team, it's supporting its own efforts to break through the opposing team by weakening its ground checks and counters, a la that other amazing offensive spiker, Greninja. Whichever route it takes, Spike's Garchomp is the latest step in Chomp's long history of excelling on offense, and thus marks it as the number 2 winner of Generation 9. Weavile was an absolute terror in Generation 8. With heavy-duty boots finally ridding it of its Stealth Rock weakness, it terrorized the metagame with its viciously powerful stab combination of Knockoff and Triple Axle. Often boosted further to game-ending levels by Swords Dance, it was of course ridiculously fast. It was of course obscenely difficult to stop to the point where many considered it broken, or at least the biggest threat in the tier. Even when it didn't outright sweep, though it often did, it left a nasty trail of carnage in its wake, which it did effortlessly thanks to the immense spammability of its knockoff. Even if it didn't do a ton of damage, it would make its mark through the removal of its switch-ins items. Most notably, this meant no leftovers on something like Scizor trying to stave it off. So what happened in Generation 9? Well, Weavile lost knockoff, that's what. Okay, you say to yourself, that's pretty bad. But is that enough to completely knock Weavile out of viability? It's still strong and fast and has great stab coverage alongside boots, right? But removing leftovers from its switches was a really big deal. And knockoff against a Pokemon that has an item is much stronger than Weavile's next strongest option for Dark Stab, which is the decidedly unimpressive Night Slash. It's barely even stronger than knockoff if the opponent doesn't have an item, except, you know, minus the part where you ensured the opponent didn't have an item. This alone was a crushing blow to Weavile, but the true death knell was the addition of Chien-Pao, which has been affectionately referred to as Mega Weavile. It's also an Ice Dark type with base 120 attack and Swords Dance. However, Chien-Pao's base 135 speed puts even Weavile's usually exceptional base 125 to shame. Chien-Pao also has much better Dark Stab in the form of Crunch. Oh, and its Sword of Ruin ability weakens the opponent's defense stat, so it's effectively stronger too. It's not enough for Weavile to lose one of its most important weapons, it has to be completely outclassed by a newcomer too, and thus Weavile stands firmly as the number 2 loser of Generation 9. Ever since it received multi-scale in Generation 5, Dragon Dance Dragonite has been one of the scariest sweepers in the game, because to beat it, you don't just have to contend with its boosted attacks, you also have to be able to hit it back in return, which is its own challenge between its great bulk and the fact that it takes half damage from attacks when at full HP, which allows it to withstand even powerful super effective moves. Yes, there's Stealth Rock, but it's dealt with that in various ways over the years. First with rapid spinning teammates and its own roost, then with Defog, and most recently, Heavy Duty Boots, which is the best by far because it's self-sufficient and its effective is immediate. Dragonite's also found different methods of boosting its power level further, whether it's Generation 5's Dragon Gem turning Outrage into an automatic KO button, or with Generation 7's Flynium Z turning Fly into a vicious supersonic strike. With Terastallization, it has found both a defensive and offensive boost, and the results are astonishing. When Dragonite Terastallizes into a normal type, it gains Stab on extreme speed. It already hits quite hard with it. It is the strongest priority move in the game after all, and Dragonite is no slouch in the attack department, but with Stab on it, it goes from a utility move to one of Dragonite's best weapons. It helps Dragonite as a DD sweeper, as for one, it doesn't just give Dragonite more efficient heft in beating opposing priority to the punch, but having another powerful move with which to finish foes off means it doesn't have to commit to an outrage lock nearly as easily. Stab E-Speed is also phenomenal for Dragonite in general. Even when it's not ready to go for a DD sweep, it loves having the extra power for a more reliable revenge killing against dangerous threats like Chien-Pao. While Dragonite's gaining these offensive benefits, it's also gaining defensive ones, making it even more ridiculous to deal with. When it transforms into a normal type, it loses all of the weaknesses aimed at its dragon flying typing. Dragonite takes neutral hits well, period, let alone neutral hits when its multi-scale is active. So forget whichever fairy, ice, dragon, or rock move you're trying to hit it with. Dragonite will shrug it off. In fact, since normal is neutral to nearly every type in the game, it's going to shrug everything that isn't a seriously powerful stab fighting move off. What are you going to do to stop it? Send the fighting type into Dragonite and get utterly destroyed? Have fun with that. Dragonite's increased defensive prowess effectively makes it even more powerful, by the way, since it allows it to set up more Dragon Dances. When people cite Terastallization as broken, normal type Dragonite is always one of the foremost examples, and for good reason. Dragonite is the biggest returning winner of Generation 9. Playing around Cinderace was just about impossible in Generation 8 OU. It wasn't enough that it was incredibly fast, quite strong, and had an excellent move pool, as thanks to its Libero ability, which changed its type to that of the move it was about to use on any given turn, it didn't just have Stab on its signature move, the powerful Pyro Ball. It also had Stab on U-turn, High Jump Kick, Zen Headbutt, and Sucker Punch, effectively far stronger than it already was naturally. Countering Cinderace was nearly impossible, as it hit just about everything hard, and thanks to Heavy Duty Boots, it easily outlasted the few Pokemon that didn't instantly collapse to its attacks. The few faster Pokemon like Dragapult and Zeraora certainly didn't want to switch into its attacks and were vulnerable to Sucker Punch. The slower Pokemon, which were the majority, were all varying degrees of wreck by its hits. The one generally reliable answer was Hippowdon, who packed both the bulk to take its hits and reliable recovery and slack off, meaning Cinderace had a tough time outlasting it. But even Hippo could and did easily lose if and when Cinderace slotted bulk up into its moveset, gaining the straight to blast past it with boost boosted high jump kick, whilst easily taking Hippo's return earthquakes thanks to the defense boost as well as the shedding of its fire typing. Cinderace was utterly unreasonable to deal with, and it was banned shortly after its release in the Isle of Armor, then was re-released in the Crown Tundra and wound up getting banned from there as well. It was so absurd to deal with that the result of many battles came down to which Cinderace got luckier against the opposing Cinderace. In Generation 9, the Libero ability has been reduced to a shell of its former self. Now Libero only activates once per switch-in, meaning the first move Cinderace uses is the type it switches to. It can still have stab on any move, just not all at the same time. This is absolutely huge. If Cinderace comes in and uses high jump kick as its first move, it will gain stab on that as it turns into a fighting type, but it will no longer have the option for stab on Pyro Ball or any other move until it switches out and back in. As a result, Cinderace is now far easier to take hits from. This change is so fundamentally huge that the former Uber is now considered barely worth anything in OU, and what little worth it does have is tied to its unique move Court Change, which swaps the positions of hazards on the field. For instance, if your opponent sets up rocks against you and you use Court Change, your opponent would lose their rocks and you would gain rocks yourself. It's an amazing move for sure, but has nothing to do with the Libero that previously made Cinderace such an unstoppable, ferocious threat. And so for experiencing a mechanics-related neutering seemingly on par with Tauros in the transition from Gen 1 to Gen 2, Cinderace is our #1 loser of Scarlet and Violet. And that's it! Well, unless there was a Pokemon that everyone hated and prayed to Arceus for something to be done about and finally had their prayers answered. But that would be too good to be true. Unless... For its antics in Generation 7 and 8, absurd longevity between Regenerator and Recover, difficult and restricting to switch into between Scald, Toxic, and Knockoff, it making itself even more obnoxious with Haze, Baneful Bunker, and Toxic Spikes, Toxapex switched in, stifled offense, and remained healthy forever, and proceeded to harass the opponent repeatedly and effortlessly. Why couldn't you use your favorite Pokemon in OU? Because it was almost like a law. If a Pokemon was cool, Toxapex would stuff it. Game Freak must have become infuriated upon facing their own creation, because they seem to have gone out of their way to neuter Toxapex in Generation 9, and it couldn't have been done to a more deserving piece of junk, said the player base at large. Good riddance. The aforementioned recovery PP having and complete deletion of Scald that hindered Slowking completely ruins Toxapex. At least Slowking can still play aggressively with its more limited longevity. Toxapex, on the other hand, relies entirely on its longevity and its ability to passively harass the opponent in return. It's not bad enough it lost Scald. It doesn't even have knockoff anymore. All it can do is threaten Toxic now. And well, that's not exactly tough to switch into when Toxapex cannot supplement this threat with literally any other such move. At least Slowking's high special attack stat lets it dish out actual direct damage. Toxapex cannot do this. Toxapex has been reduced to a walling blob that can't do anything in return. Previously, it was dangerous because it wasn't passive if used well, but now it is passive exclusively, and it's incredibly easy to exploit as a result. Before, if Toxapex took your hits, you were sweating because now it would mess with your switch-in. Now, if Toxapex takes your hits, you thank your opponent for using such a largely useless Pokemon, which you can beat a million different ways since it can't stop you from doing pretty much anything. Toxapex went from OU's most hated to OU's most laughed at, and as such, it is the biggest loser of Generation 9. So big, it broke the rule of 3 and received the number 0 slot. This list, of course, is not objective by any measure, especially considering how new Generation 9 is. Terrestrialization may not stick around in its current form, or even at all, which may affect other Pokemon to be considered for such places. These things aren't always revealed right at the beginning, after all. Let us know in the comments if there are any other returning Pokemon who are major winners or losers in Scarlet and Violet that you think would have been apt for such a list. Who knows, once the metagame shifts, we may return to this subject in the future. Thanks for watching, everyone. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. Thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.